They called it the era of purity, a time when emotion was outlawed, sterilized from society like a disease. No joy, no grief, no fear, no love. The Galactic Aletha, Xerelian High Council, had decided long ago that emotion was the source of all chaos. So they removed it, bit by bit, over centuries, through genetic regulation, neural damping, and cultural erasure. They had silenced the heart of their civilization. Laughter became a criminal impulse. Crying was considered a mental defect. Smiling was punishable by reconditioning. And it worked. On paper, the galaxy prospered. The economy was flawless. Decisions were swift and logical. Wars stopped. Crime fell. Bureaucracy thrived. But beneath the surface, something vital was missing. Life continued, cold and calculated, across silver towers and steel cities, and no one questioned it. Not the educators, who spoke in monotone. Not the architects, who built perfect structures with no character. Not even the children, who were taught numbers before names. It had been 203 standard cycles since the last public expression of emotion, till a human arrived. His name was Miles. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a scientist or soldier or spy. He was, as he claimed, just a guy with a sense of humor and poor navigation skills. The Council had intercepted his ship in the outer sector Zan, unauthorized vessel wandering too close to restricted space. At first they thought it was a pirate, perhaps a lost scout. But what they found was worse. He had books, videos, stand-up recordings. He had spent months alone watching old Earth comedy specials, reading absurdist fiction, and cracking jokes into a mirror to keep from going insane. To the Xerelians, it was a horror. A contagious, ancient virus emotion, raw and unfiltered, contained in one reckless human. They did what they always did with anomalies. They put him on trial. The Grand Tribunal of Zeril was a hollow dome of gray glass and white marble, surrounded by silence so thick it felt sacred. Judges hovered in translucent orbs above the circular floor. Observers lined the upper tiers, silent, stoic, unblinking. And in the center, in a yellow prison jumpsuit, stood the man who would change everything. Miles looked around at the empty stairs. He cleared his throat. Tough room, no response. Okay. So 3 aliens walk into a starport. Still nothing. No flicker, no twitch. Just the icy hum of machines and 1,000 unreadable faces. The first one says, "Hey, do you smell that?" Second one says, "Smell what?" Third one says, "Exactly." Silence. Then a sound. A small, involuntary snirk from one of the lower-tier judges. It echoed in the dome like a gunshot. Heads turned. The judge's face twitched. He covered his mouth. A tremor ran through him. He coughed, eyes wide, as if betrayed by his own body. Miles smiled, stepping closer. "Hey, I'm here all week. Try the synthesized veal." The council erupted, not in laughter, but in chaos. Security drones dropped from the ceiling. Warning lights flared crimson. The judge who laughed was yanked from his orb and dragged out like a biohazard. Miles stood calmly as the alarms rang. So, not fans of observational humor, huh? He was declared a threat to galactic stability. It's not for weapons, not for violence, but because he had triggered an emotional response. A glitch in the system. Reminder that under all the logic and silence, there were still hearts capable of feeling. The council labeled it a cognitive outbreak. He was to be isolated indefinitely and studied under heavy neural dampening protocols. The trial was sealed from public record. But it was already too late. Because someone in the chamber had felt something, and feeling once remembered is hard to forget. They locked him away in a facility buried inside an asteroid belt. No windows, no sound, only nutrient paste, regulated air, and sterile walls. He should have gone mad, but Miles adapted. He paced. He talked to himself. He named the wall panels. He kept his sense of timing sharp by delivering imaginary monologues to the shadows, and the guards listened. At first, secretly, just through the audio feed while pretending to monitor his vitals. Then, curiously, lingering longer, turning up the volume. And then quietly with their neural dampeners off. They started to chuckle, just a little. The guard was named Vrillon 5, though she'd never spoken her own name aloud. Like the others assigned to the cognitive containment zone. She'd been selected for her emotional stability measured in nanometric units of brainwave flatness. The flatter, the safer. But lately, Vrelin's mind wasn't flat anymore. She sat in her security pod, staring at the human pacing in his cell below. He had drawn faces on his food trays. One smiled. One frowned. One looked suspiciously like her. And then I told the AI therapist, Miles said, arms flailing, I'm not lonely. I just like arguing with my toaster. Vrelin felt something. Not joy, not quite, but something warm, something twitchy in her chest. She quickly reapplied her dampening patch, but the moment was already lodged in her thoughts. That night, she pulled up a restricted Earth archive. Just one video. Just 5 minutes. Laughter, applause, music, human voices layered with emotion. It was overwhelming. She trembled for an hour after watching, but she watched it again the next night, and the next. Miles had no idea how far his influence had spread. Guards started sneaking him extra food. One left him a crude microphone built from a broken intercom. Someone smuggled in a projector. Suddenly his sterile cell became a stage, began performing nightly. No crowd, no cameras. Just him and the knowing presence of unseen watchers behind the walls. Why don't aliens eat at buffets? 'Cause every time they go back for seconds, they annex the salad bar? It was ridiculous. And someone laughed out loud. A sharp bark of amusement that echoed in the vents before abruptly cutting off. Miles froze, then smiled. We're making progress, people. The warden noticed the change. Discipline reports were down. Guards were more alert, more responsive, but also distracted. Speech patterns drifted. Eye contact increased. One officer was caught humming. The warden issued immediate Level 6 audits. In doing so, he triggered the very thing the council feared: internal emotion scanning. The results were terrifying. Laughter levels rising. Empathy scores unstable. Mood indexes fluctuating. In a facility once proud of its sterile metrics, now over 60% of personnel showed signs of emergent behavioral color. It wasn't just a containment breach. It was an outbreak. A week later, Miles received a visitor. She entered his cell without expression. Pale skin, long robes, high caste markings. Her eyes didn't blink. Her lips were tight. I am Monitor Elsha. I oversee emotional quarantine across the central systems. Miles nodded. Cool. I'm Miles. I once cried over a cartoon squirrel and I'm not ashamed. No response. She stepped closer. What is your purpose? To amuse, elaborate, to make people laugh, to make them feel, to poke at life until it giggles. Why? Miles paused. For the first time in weeks, he took the question seriously. Because feeling pain means you're alive, but feeling joy, that means you're human, or whatever you are. It means something matters. Elsha stared at him. He saw something in her, a tremble behind the eyes, a war between programming and memory. Then she spoke. Tell me a joke. Later, when Elsha returned to the council chambers, she carried no data, no recordings, just silence. But her hand trembled as she placed it on the table. He is dangerous, she said. Back in his cell, Miles had begun drawing again, this time on the floor with melted protein paste. Faces, dancing figures. A sunrise. He looked up at the hidden cameras. You're not machines, he said softly. Not really. You're people pretending not to be. You've just forgotten. He waited. The room stayed silent. But in Control Room C, 5 guards wept, without knowing why. And the warden, alone in his office, covered his face and laughed. Just once, just enough. It began with whispers, not spoken ones. Those were still forbidden. But digital murmurs, cryptid pings, ghost data. Officers across the central system started trading compressed joke files like contraband. A smiley face drawn on a report header. A limerick hidden in maintenance logs. An old Earth video of a dog riding a skateboard. They called it the Echo. And always, at the center of it all, was the human Miles locked in a prison that no longer held him. He didn't know the extent of the movement, didn't have access to the network, but he felt it. It's the way his guards walked differently, the way the food came warmer. It's the way the silence around him had changed. It was no longer heavy. It waited, as if hoping for the next punchline. Miles sat in the corner of his cell, arms crossed. So a Zarelian, a Tormac, and a human walk into a space bar. He grinned, waiting. And the bartender says, "Is this some kind of interspecies joke?" Whoa. Somewhere in the ventilation system, a burst of laughter escaped before the mic cut out. He stood up, pacing. "Come on, that one killed on Europa." High above, in the capital world of Varn 7, the High Council grew nervous. They had ignored the early reports, considered the outbreak a statistical anomaly. But the data was undeniable now. Art had returned, on factory walls, on data tablets. Even in official council buildings, unauthorized sketches of faces showing expression, of suns rising over oceans no Zarelian had ever seen. The emotional suppression infrastructure, neural inhibitors, genetic filters, AI monitors was failing. Not technically, philosophically. The people no longer feared feelings. They missed them. And the council didn't know how to stop it. They brought in an emergency assembly of the Doctrine of Order, a committee that hadn't met in 2 centuries. The head of the committee, a shriveled gray being named Uric 13, trembled as he addressed the room. "Emotion," he said, voice dry as ash, is the root of entropy. We suppressed it for peace, for perfection. But now our unity is cracking. The infection must be neutralized. The human must be erased. In his cell, Miles sat cross-legged, eyes closed. He had begun meditating, not because he needed peace, but because it let him remember Earth. The smell of real coffee. The burn of laughter in your gut when someone said something truly stupid. The taste of tears when no one was watching. He missed those things. He wondered if anyone else in this cold, sterilized galaxy had ever felt them. Then the door hissed open. 3 guards entered. One of them carried a neural scrubber. Miles stood up. So, no goodbye kiss. No one spoke. They moved toward him. And then stopped. The lead guard dropped the scrubber, looked at Miles, then whispered, "Tell us one more joke." What followed was not a fight, not a mutiny. It was something far more dangerous to the council. It was a choice. The guards defected. The broadcast went live. They called it the crack broadcast. A 60-minute unfiltered stream beamed across every network node in the galactic core. No propaganda, no council-approved message, just a human and a mic. He sat on a crate, inside his cell, wearing a bed sheet like a cape, and holding a microphone made from a dismantled food dispenser. Behind him, 3 former guards stood smiling, and in front of him, his invisible audience. Billions. Miles began to speak. "I'm not here to start a war. I don't want your empire. I don't even want your throne, unless the chair has a good backrest. I'm here for something simpler." He held up a drawing, a crude stick figure, smiling under 2 suns. "I want this. I want you to remember what it felt like to laugh, to cry, to feel. You say emotions are dangerous, that they cause war, chaos, mess. You're right." He leaned forward. "But so does breathing, and I don't see you giving that up." The broadcast didn't start a revolution. The revolution had already begun. This was just the punchline. In the following days, across the Empire, soldiers laid down weapons and picked up instruments. Children colored their sterile floors with chalk murals of imagined worlds. A janitor started a podcast where he cried reading poetry. And one AI broke its emotion lock and composed a symphony of binary code titled O1LOVE01. The High Council declared state collapse protocol. Entire regions refused the command. In an abandoned outpost on the rim, a mining crew gathered around a rusted console. Watching the archive stream of Miles' performance for the 100th time, one of them, a hardened Vascari female, wiped a tear from her cheek. "I never knew I could feel this," she whispered. Her crewmates didn't respond. They just watched, smiling. Back on Varn 7, the council issued a warrant. Miles, human designation, to be terminated on sight. But when the enforcers arrived at the asteroid prison, they found it empty. No guards. No human. Only a message carved into the cell wall. "Gone to start an open mic night? Bring snacks." In secret pockets across the stars, the comedy underground formed. Humans and aliens together, telling stories, laughing, weeping, not to bring down empires, but to remind each other they were alive. And somewhere in the drifting dark, Miles kept moving, telling jokes, listening, connecting. He never led an army, didn't need to. He'd given the galaxy something far more powerful than weapons. He gave them back their feelings. The High Council didn't fall in fire. It fell in silence. Not the sterile silence they once commanded, but the kind that came when the people simply stopped listening. Their orders echoed unanswered. Their guards left their posts not in rebellion, but because they no longer believed in the system they protected. The towers of Arnsivan still stood. The machines still hummed. But something fundamental had changed. The people had remembered what it meant to feel, and no law could erase that. The edge of the core world's a small freighter docked with a forgotten outpost. The place had been abandoned for over a century, a relic of the old war eras. Inside the main hall, a crowd had gathered. Hundreds of species, young and old, silent. A single spotlight flicked on. And there, walking out in worn boots and a patched-up coat, was Miles. He cleared his throat. So I met a Gralix the other day, 7 arms. No sense of personal space. Laughter. And I told him, buddy, if you want to hug me, at least buy me dinner first. More laughter. Clapping. Someone whistled. But then Miles held up a hand. The room fell quiet. I want to tell you something different tonight, he said. Not a joke. A truth. He looked out at the crowd. Faces of every shape. All watching, waiting. You were never broken. You were just scared. Scared of what emotions might do, but you forgot. They're not weakness. He stepped forward. They're proof that we're real. Pain means something mattered. Love means someone did. And laughter. Laughter is the soul stretching its arms. He smiled gently. You don't need me to make you laugh anymore. You just needed permission. And with that, he dropped the mic. That moment became known as the first ovation. Not because of how loud the clapping was, but because of what followed. Across the galaxy, species once silenced by fear began to sing. The children of Varn painted murals on the old council walls. On the cold moon of Theraxis, 1,000 miners stopped working and danced in the snow. Even the A's began telling jokes, strange, clunky things, but full of effort, of intent. A universe that had been still for centuries began to breathe again. And Miles. He disappeared soon after. No one knows exactly where he went. Some say he returned to Earth. Some say he became a myth appearing only when the stars dim. Others claim he's out there still, hitching rides between freighters, whispering jokes into the void. But every cycle, on the date of that last performance, people across 100,000 systems gather. They tell stories, they cry, they sing, they laugh, and they live. Years passed, not in silence but in song. The galaxy changed not all at once, but steadily, like ice melting in the morning sun. What had been a machine of logic became a canvas of color. The old statues of the High Council were taken down. In their place, new monuments rose, not of warriors, not of kings, but of a man in torn boots, holding a microphone made from scrap. Beneath each statue in 100 different languages was a single word: remember. In the rebuilt halls of the Central Archive, children gathered to hear stories once banned. One story always came last. The tale of the man who told jokes when no one else dared. The story of how one human, with no army, no power, and no plan, reminded the galaxy what it meant to feel. They called him the comedian of the stars, but he never wanted a title. Miles had only ever wanted to see someone smile. On a backwater planet, forgotten by most maps, a small tavern buzzed with laughter. An old man leaned behind the bar, polishing a cracked glass. He didn't talk much, but every so often when the stars aligned and the room grew quiet, someone would ask, "Did you ever hear of the man who made the galaxy laugh?" The bartender would smile. "Yeah," he'd say, voice gravel soft. He told the best joke of all. And what was the joke? No one could ever agree. Some say it was the one about the Gralix with no sense of personal space. Others say it was the joke carved into the council chamber walls. But those who understood, those who had felt what Miles gave them, they always smiled when asked. Because the joke wasn't just a line. It wasn't something you heard. It was something you lived. A whisper in your soul that said, it's okay to feel. It's okay to cry. It's okay to laugh. You're alive. And that's enough. And so, the galaxy turned. Not perfect, not clean, but beautifully, wonderfully human.